So it's officially episode 9. This is going to be part 2 of our 2020 Flute Care guide. And tonight we're going to get to the more in-depth questions that we weren't able to get to when we did our first half of this show a few weeks ago. So just to introduce us once again for people who may be watching us for the very first time, we've got Rachel Simon from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. She's the flute mechanic. We've got Kim Jurens from Vancouver Island.
No. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Vancouver Island. Not Vancouver.
In
Vancouver Island.
In the wonderful country of Canada, land of the Seine. Of Kimberly Jurens Woodwind Repairs, and we've got Adam Petrie from Petrie Piccolos down in Atlanta, Georgia, and myself, Sarah Stockton. I'm with Boundless Flutes in Middletown, Connecticut. So we have our usual disclaimers in that our opinions are our own, not those of anyone who we may or may not be affiliated with. We may disagree on some things, but that's okay. That's how this goes. We reserve the right to change our minds on anything that we say tonight, and we probably will. And use any of this information at your own risk. But you also know who to call if you mess it up.
We don't want you to, we're going to try real hard.
Yeah,
so that
we would love to meet you, but not that way. So all right, so we are it's October. This is super exciting. I see a lot of our patrons joining us here tonight on our Zoom, which is awesome. So if you're interested in joining our Patreon, we would love to see you there. We've got a player chat coming up next week, actually. So we'll be meeting with our player patrons and talking about all good flute stuff then. And then at the end of the month, we have our tech chat in which our tech patrons will be joining Jeff Buick from Muramatsu America for a very exciting Muramatsu nerd talk. And we have lots of exciting things coming up in the future. So whether you're a player or a tech, if you'd like to join us on Patreon, it's always a good time to do that. All right, so we're going to kick off tonight and talk about accessories that you can use on your flute as a player. So this is sort of our 2020 accessories guide, what's out there on the flute market that may help you to be more comfortable when you're playing, or to clean your flute a little bit better, or just add a little bit of style and bling to your flute life. So I'm going to roll my screws. They got loose. They ran away. They're there. I'm going to roll my screws. We're going to do our normal format. We're going to each take 30 seconds, and then we're going to free for all for a little bit longer because we only have 4 big topics to talk about tonight. So we're just going to take our time a little bit on those, but we are going to keep our tradition of the 30 seconds because that does seem to work pretty well for us. I'm going to make sure my timer says 30 seconds and not 30 minutes.
I could do 30 minutes.
I was just going to say, because Kim might actually think that was 30 seconds. I love you, Kim.
It can so
do.
happen. Time runs away from me. It's not my fault.
I love it. All right, so we're shaking this. First up, oh yeah, our first question. So we're talking about accessories. So this is like, I guess for our 30 seconds, we'll just pick whatever we...
Pick a couple?
Yeah, pick something that nobody else picked. All right, going first is Kim.
Yay.
Next is Rachel. After that, we've got Adam, and that makes me last. All right, Kim, take it away.
This worked well, actually. One of the things that I get asked a lot about for older players is that are having the problems with arthritis or something like that, or need something modified. One of the accessories that is actually aftermarket readily available are key extensions, and so this one goes on your first finger. Adam actually has a metal one put on his flute. So this just clips on, and it's available aftermarket. And then these are extensions that go in open holes. So they just kind of clip in there.
Sorry, I didn't know if you could see me. I was doing the dance.
I can't see you.
We need the air horn.
There we go. Air horn.
No, as soon as you put it on speaker view, I couldn't see anything.
Okay, that's cool.
When you go big, you disappear. So anyways, okay, cool. So there we go.
All right, cool. I don't know what, oh, there we go. Are we back? Is this not on Kim anymore?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, So who's up next?
Me.
Rachel. I'm gonna make you big.
Okay.
All right,
Um,
Rachel, go.
So I'll start with my favorite cleaning supplies. I really like the Beaumont products because they're readily available and they have some great stuff. I like they have this mesh one. I need to look up the actual link, but I like this mesh for cleaning the bore and the head joint and such. And then their microfiber cloths I like for the exterior, not so much the inside, but certainly to get fingerprints off the outside. This is the best to me. It does a good job of cleaning and it doesn't scratch, which I'm big on. I hate fine scratches on things. So
Yeah.
those are my two favorite cleaning products right now.
Perfect timing. I don't know where, oh, there's the button. Okay. All right, so next up we have Adam. All right, Adam, you are big. Go for it.
As far as like immediate like accessory in terms of like how to care for your instrument, I mean, of course, like I really like these style swabs, the wand or flute flag, piccolo flag style. Piccolo just because they come apart, they unscrew, and that's really nice for in rehearsal. But also like cases and bags are kind of they're an underappreciated tool that we use to kind of make sure that we're ready for our day as players. And there are a lot of options available within that spectrum to kind of take care of anything that can happen. So I have a whole pile of them for later once we can free for all.
Awesome. And that was
yeah.
it. Okay, cool. All right, so for my 30 seconds, let's see, spotlight. There, okay. Yeah. Well, Kim mentioned some finger extensions. So kind of along those lines, Powell makes these great things called pluggos. And they're similar to just the regular silicone or plastic open hole plugs, which I thought were handy, but I don't see them. So it's the same thing, just looks a little bit nicer, makes your flute look like it is just has silver keys in it. My other, oh, I'm out. Okay, so let's free for all.
And there we go.
And that was it. All right, so what time we started? Like 8:25-ish, 8:20?
Yeah, 8:25. Yeah.
Okay, so if we take like 15, so 10, so we'll say like we can free for all for like maybe 10 minutes on this.
Yeah.
I think our other topics will need more time, truthfully.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The link for the Beaumont stuff is beaumontmusic.co. So if anybody's looking for that, I find the easiest way to find it honestly is to Google Beaumont flute because that will bring up the cases. And they sell cases and all sorts of other stuff too. So cool.
So I'm going to do a shameless product plug for Adam because he was talking about his cases, and like I got the very first piccolo bag that he was selling. I was order number 1. It was very exciting. And not only does it hold,
I have one of those too. Look
yay!
at that.
I'm going to let you talk about it. The only thing that I wanted to say is that it smells so good. It smells so good. So Adam, you can talk about its actual function. I just like to smell mine.
No, that's not weird or anything at all. No,
it's not.
No.
It smells that good. I'm not ashamed.
number one selling point.
It is. So anyway, Adam, like what did you design your bag for? Like what makes it?
Oh, well, I was not quite expecting to jump that far, but I mean,
sorry.
just to like talk about like my bags. Oh Lord, and this is not meant to be like product placement, but it was just designed to be something that's casual, that's discreet, so that way you can take it from a rehearsal into like some sort of function. It has, when you open it up, you have your main compartment, but you also have an inner zippered pouch. It's all black, so you can't really see since my screen is dark, but it has an inner accessory pouch. It was just meant to accommodate a lot of different sizes, but mainly to house my personal instruments on this album. But no, like the reason I had that out is just because like I thought if we were going to talk about accessories that are important, we should talk about like the cases and the case covers and the bags that are available on the market.
Cool.
Just because all of our work as technicians is worthless if it goes out in a box that is not fitted and is not well taken care of. And I realized sort of sitting amongst all of my shelves and things like that, I have most of the major like case makers that are out there in their bags. So for like the step up student stuff, aside from like the hard plastic like clamshell style cases, you also have like the ProTac stuff, which for student intermediate stuff that works really well. This one is like 20 years old, but you know, back then they had this like nice large outer pouch and a, you know, long one across the back. I don't know what they're like now, but those are nice. As far as like hard cases go, you know, you have the traditional like French style cases. This one is one I use to house head joints. But you know, just a traditional French style case. One of the newer things that's sort of hitting the flute market, this is actually a case that's in for a COA right now. But it's one of the BAM cases. These are super nice.
I love those.
Yeah,
I like them.
I don't have any of the Wiseman cases here, but I do know that Wiseman will make just about any case that you can request. I even have someone having them send a single piccolo case over from Wiseman that takes 2 piccolo head joints. So it's going to be a little baby case, and I'm kind of excited to see that.
Cool.
You also have like the less expensive hardwood cases that you can buy, you know, off of most sort of big box online shops, you know, that come out of Asia. They can be hit or miss, but I did a lot of homework just to see kind of what was good and what wasn't. And this is actually one of the cases that my personal instruments got on trial in, just because the cases mine come in are extremely expensive. If you're looking for like a custom hardwood case, I know here in the States, David Chu, he makes incredible hardwood cases. And I know at some point I expect to commission a couple of those. But you also have out of Europe, they're based out of Rome. It's a company called EBO Winds. They made a lot of the cases for the Powell company, like right when they were making like the 21 and 3100 that had those heavy wood cases. But that's what I'm using now for my personal instruments. But like this is one of the cases, and they're made to order, and you know, you put in the dimensions, and those are super, super nice.
And so that's the company that made those awesome Powell cases with like the molded
the rubber.
Those are sweet. I love the way they fit the flutes, and they
So-
last forever. I mean, really the only
Forever.
failing point is the hinges.
We should probably not linger on cases too much longer if we want to get to
Yeah.
other stuff.
Oh,
But
right.
of course, beyond that, you also have like your styling bags, your Altieri bags that last like 500 years. And now the people who owned Altieri and then sold it, they now have started the company called Crescendo Bags with some new designs. And anyway, it's important to have good cases and covers. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
all got.
Yeah, I wanted to take a second and talk about thumb ports. If I could do that.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's see. Okay, so I use the thumb port actually on my own personal flute, and I never really understood how important it was until I bought this flute that I have. So my my high school teacher set me up to play kind of like a modified Rockstro grip, which is the head joint's just a little bit in, the flute is turned just a little bit out, and your thumb kind of rests on the back of the instrument so that you're free to use all 9 of your fingers, and that way your pinky doesn't get stuck. Now, I, in high school and college, had a Muramatsu that then got stolen, and that grip worked extremely well on that flute, and that's how I kind of learned, you know, my formative years of doing a lot of practicing. So when that flute got stolen, I got this one. It's a Mateki. I bought it sight unseen from Flute World, but it was what I could afford at the time, and I love it. I just totally fell in love with it. I had never heard of Mateki ever, but the problem on this flute, which I didn't realize what it was until I started repairing and started playing a whole lot of flutes, is that this flute has a particularly heavy C-sharp trill key, and what that does is it pulls the flute backwards, and the whole flute just rolls backwards constantly. And so my grip that I worked so many years to get does not work on this flute. Like, I literally cannot hold the flute without it rolling backwards. And it's not about my having a bad hand position, it's about the weight of this particular flute, because I can do it on other flutes no problem. So when I play my flute, I have a thumb port, I just pop it on the back like that, it has that little lip on it. And what that does is it allows me to have my really great hand position.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, and it totally frees up my pinky again. So speaking of freeing up my pinky, I had this modification done by John Lund before I learned how to. I still wouldn't aspire to making something that beautiful, but what I had him do was angle my foot joint cluster toward my hand so that it would put less stress. I don't have to reach as far to get to low B, and I have this handy dandy ability now to roll from C straight to E flat because the C roller sticks out so far. So that's a really nice modification. He also closed up my G key and made my flute feel like an offset G, which is super handy. I do miss the open hole on like a couple of Ian Clark pieces, but
he's retired now.
I saw that he just retired. I was very happy that I got this done before he retired.
Well, and also you have that great G sharp lever modification as well.
Yeah, he extended that and made it.
Yeah, and it really fits nicely next to that button.
It does,
So
and
that's something
you can achieve this effect with the Brannon extensions that Kim showed earlier, and it's not a permanent modification. But I knew that like I'm not getting rid of this flute ever, and I actually think it's probably, now that everybody likes offset G, it's actually probably more sellable now than it would be as an inline. So I'm not worried about that. And does somebody else want to talk? I have more things I could show, but I don't want to hog the screen. So.
Well, I had one thing to add since you were talking about right-hand supports.
Okay.
Last year, I came across for the first time a Kuiman. Is that how you say it?
Yes. Those are great.
They're really great because it, well, first of all, it was just so comfortable. It was the first right-hand support where I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. I want to own one. And it fits your thumb like a saddle. And it opens up your hand position, which is also beneficial. And furthermore, what I really like about it also is that the way that it's affixed to the flute does not squeeze the tube. It's got a silicone harness. It makes it a little bit more intricate to put on. You can't just like pop it on, and you also have to take some care taking it on and off because you don't want to interfere with springs. But if you know that you're always going to be using it anyways, you can just set it and forget it. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that one up. I don't have one to show, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that is
those are nice.
Yeah, with the so with the thumb ports and the bow peps, so these guys which kind of go here, those do squeeze the flute tube a little bit. So sometimes I'll ask players to include that in the case when I do a COA or other work on their flute, because it does change the shape of the tone holes sometimes. So if someone's a really particular player, I will do my padding work with that device in place. I've had other clients where, you know, I'll like insist that they send it to me, and then, you know, they'll like, I'll send it, I'll make everything absolutely perfect, and then, you know, next time I'll be like, okay, did you bring your thing? They're like, I didn't notice a difference. So it's not like necessarily gonna like make or break it if you forget to throw it in. It's just like, our job is to be obsessive and notice those tiny little details.
That's what you're paying for.
That's what you're paying for. But honestly, like probably 99% of people are not going to notice. So,
but if you think of it, it's cool. You know,
it's cool if you think of it. Yeah, exactly.
We can replicate that.
That was our timer. Do we want to like quick throw in?
Can I toss one more thing about the case covers, because we talked about cases a lot, but one of the things that I'd like to sort of elaborate on is that even if you have a student level instrument, getting a case cover that goes, this is Flute or Scooter one that I happen to have, getting a case cover for it is always a good investment, because it gives you the space in there to put all of the accessories that you might need if you're like cleaning one, your cloths that you use. If you have like a metronome, it gives you one place that you can safely put them, because there isn't space to put all that stuff in your hardshell case. And especially for students that are going between classes, or they're doing various things where they don't have a soft shell case at all, spending a little bit of money on an extra like case also provides a bit more protection for it and bump protection, especially if you're like going back and forth to school or riding the bus or doing orchestra or band rehearsals and stuff like that. So it is worth spending. I mean, they're a little bit of money. They're sometimes like $100, $150, and which sounds like a lot, but They are really durable, and they're a really good investment. So
it's really a safety feature. Like these
Yeah.
French style cases, if you drop one of these without a cover on it, it could actually jostle and fly open. Well, first of all, don't drop it.
Yes.
But
So
second of all, it's like having a seatbelt for the case for the flute.
yeah.
So I feel like they're kind of indispensable. Really, even though they kind of seem like a fun accessory, and they can be a fun accessory, they're also
Yeah.
important.
Cool.
So
okay.
Yeah. So that's the only thing I'd like to add, is that they are really, really worth investing in. Even if you're renting an instrument, to be honest, it's worth it, and you can always resell it later.
Cool.
All right.
I'm gonna shoehorn in one more thing.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for myself. In that you can order custom crowns. I make these. They're pretty and sparkly. That one's the sparkle crown. This is the triquetra. It's pretty popular. I make them in both weighted and unweighted. So this one's a lot heavier than this one is. I can control the weight. So some people think that it has an effect on the sound. Yeah, on some flutes it makes a difference. Some flutes it doesn't. I also am making a weighted a weight kit to put inside of your head joint. So that's
I
customizable.
so need to get one of those.
All different sizes. I make them we're still kind of in the prototyping phase, but it's just about there. So that's coming soon. The other one that, people talk about all the time, which I don't make, but the Lip Freaks, if you want to know more about those, go to Flute Forum.
You'll have plenty to look at.
And just to clarify, it actually is pronounced Le Freak. It is not Le Frec or anything like that. It is actually correctly pronounced.
Because it's frequency. It's based on the word frequency. So
that's
anyway, Adam, you will just say something.
Just to clarify.
Well, just to show these crowns, they're really pretty.
I'm really pretty.
Very handsome.
But then also this is my personal flute, but this is I made this. That's but beautiful. This was a copy of, it's in brass. I need to go back and do it in sterling, but this is a copy of the Brannon C sharp key extension. And that's just to kind of give you an idea of height wise how it sits and dimensionally where it is. But yeah, this is my orthopedic flute, so
love it.
There we go.
Awesome. Cool, guys. Anything else that we want to throw in there?
Just using the tape if you're going to use the BoPep things.
Oh yeah.
It is really important to put some packing tape or something underneath, on the flute body itself, or some mask, something, because they will scratch the body of the flute. And at least they frequently can scratch the body of the flute. I've had a couple that don't, but it is sort of a known problem, and the scratches are deep. It is more than just taking some silver, having your tech take some silver polish and polish it out. They are deep enough that they are significant. So protect your flute and put some tape on it.
Yeah,
call a tech and ask.
Yeah, and the don't worry about any sticky residue from the tape. That's very simple to clean off and will not hurt your instrument.
Much easier than scratch removal.
Yes, exactly. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So our next this one's $1 million question. Is the fuzzy tone you or the flute? So how to tell? How are you going to be able to tell this? All right, let's roll. Oh, I lost. Who did I lose? Adam, I lost. Wait, no, Blue. Who's Blue?
Probably lose a screw.
Here you are. Okay, I did. I lost a screw. Also marbles. I have no more marbles.
Good thing it's not a marble show.
All right, Adam, you're first. Kim, you're second. Rachel, you're third, and I am last again. All right, so yeah.
Fuzzy.
How do you tell if it's you or the flute or the piccolo, Adam?
Well, to just kind of kick it off, just because I know that the three of you all will have more than enough to sound off on this, but I did once have a girl that said, my sound is fuzzy, but I took all the wrappers off of my pads. It peeled the skins off of every single pad. It's a brand new flute.
Oh, that poor dear. Oh.
And I was like, oh, poor thing, those weren't wrappers.
Oh, that poor thing.
Oh.
Anyway,
That's a
if you
really
have,
expensive mistake.
if you have taken the wrappers off of all of your key cup pads, it's probably that effort that has produced the fuzzy sound, because she just was like, ever since I did that, I just sound fuzzy.
Okay.
And I'm like, I bet you do.
Yeah, poor thing. All right. Well, that's 30 seconds.
Wow.
Kim.
Top that.
Woo, yeah, top that.
Oh, I really, actually, I can. One of the things that I always check, if your sound is not quite top it, but one of the things to also double check is if it's sort of gradually getting fuzzy and you can't really specify where it is, it's not certain notes or anything like that, is to check the embouchure hole where you actually blow in, to make sure that you aren't accumulating your lunch or coffee or anything else on that edge. And if you have, I don't have a head joint. Oh, maybe I can.
People cheese is gross.
People cheese.
Right.
If it, this is my, I'll be fast.
That you're out. You're out.
yeah.
You're out. You're out. Do it during the free for all.
Oh.
Oh, shut down.
With the hammer.
Rachel,
Sarah, the
30
magnificent.
Okay. Anyways.
All right.
Yeah.
If you have a dirty embouchure hole, you're on your own. No, just kidding. Kim will show you how.
During the free for all.
And I don't, this problem is something that afflicts virtually every flute player. You know, it happens to all, and like we all have that day where it's just like, am I just a little bit worse at the flute today, or like, do I need to practice more? And for a lot of us, we like to just try a different flute, but that's not always an option, especially not during a pandemic. You can't like borrow someone's flute. That's not necessarily advisable anyways. So in short, my methods won't necessarily work. I like to try another instrument. Like even if you have like your if you have a backup flute or your old student flute, it helps just to have a point of comparison.
That's time. All right.
Okay.
See, I'm gonna be mean to Rachel too.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm an impartial timer. All right. If you're specifically having trouble with your high notes, it's a really good thing to check that your head joint cork is sealing, because if you have a leaky head joint cork, pretty much everything above high F will be much more difficult to come out, and if not absolutely impossible. So if you haven't played your flute in a while, and you're just picking it up again for the first time, and or you're kind of noticing that your top octave is just super difficult, it could be the head joint cork. All right, free for all. Let's do it. Kim first.
Okay. I think I'm like 90% of the way there. So what I was trying to say, 2 for 1. Also, if you find that your lip slips, push stamps are great. This is on my old flute. But sometimes what happens is that just this blowing edge here gets just accumulated with stuff. And a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip, or even just plain water on a Q-tip, and just really carefully, delicately kind of going in there and rubbing it. You want to make sure that you're not like being aggressive, and you've got one that doesn't have any sharp edges.
Yep.
But that is one thing that you can definitely do, and you can visually inspect it because it should look reasonably shiny. And if it looks like it's growing things,
we actually did a good demo of this in our first half of this episode. So
so that would definitely be something that if it's sort of gradually getting fuzzy for no real apparent discernible reason, is definitely worth checking in on.
Cool. So one thing that I like to do is also, if you have an open hole flute, it's a good idea to try plugging the holes, because especially as you get older, your fingers change. And what was once an easy reach for you may not be an easy reach anymore. And I have a lot of older clients who were kind of shamed into not using their plugs when they were younger. Their teachers told them that like that's a horrible thing to do, and it's like totally amateurish, and like people don't use plugs, and nothing could be further from the truth. Like,
yeah, that's so not cool.
It's so not cool. Use the
It
plugs.
hurts people.
It hurts. Like, your health is more important than somebody's opinion that plugging an open hole is somehow inferior to having your holes open. Like, just plug them. So if you're having trouble with fuzzy sound and you're not sure, plug the holes. And I know that like as techs, you know, we talk about this all the time, especially me and Rachel and Kim, because our hands are small. So there are just certain models of flutes that I cannot play with the holes open on the right hand. I just can't. So like I have a set of plugs on my bench all the time, and almost every time I do a COA, an overhaul, or whatever, I pop the plugs in at some point just to eliminate that variable that what I'm hearing is me or the flute. So plugs.
Another really simple one is think back about the last time that you had your flute serviced. Because if it has been a year or more, assume it is your instrument. But like a really simple way that you can tell is you can just take your head joint, pop the crown off of it, and draw suction on the end just to make sure that like you don't really have a really bad head cork in there. Because by drawing suction on only the end will allow you to isolate whether or not the head cork is sealing. Because the attempt from the other way can expose a leak in the solder here. But just as a really quick one, you know, just popping this off and on is not going to hurt anything. As long as you don't like drop it and it rolls down a drain, you're buying a new one. But
yeah, and to that point, without having your how recently your flute was worked on, I had a customer with a flute that he had for about 10 years, and he was just used to playing it the way that it was, and he played it for me. This was a while ago, and he's like, oh yeah, the low B, I you know, I just need to keep working on that low B. I don't play it very often, so it's difficult for me. And so I just like, do you want to try my flute? And I like gave him something that I knew, you know, I was a freshly overhauled instrument of my personal collection, and he gave it a try, and the low B just banged right out, and he was just like, you know, surprised. It's like, I know it was not you all the time. Just give yourself a break.
It's true.
One thing you can also check is check on the blowing edge of your lip plate to see if there are any scratches here.
Yeah.
Because
don't try to fix them yourself, though.
No, don't try to fix them yourself.
just to clarify.
If your flute has taken a tumble and it got repaired and it came back and it is still fuzzy, check this area to see if there's anything here that is not immaculate, because any sort of sharp edge in this vicinity will create sort of a hiss inside the sound.
I want to talk about just different key combinations that can be leaky. So you have 3 different ways to play B flat on your flute, 2 different ways to play F sharp. So you can use those to gauge whether a certain pad is leaking or certain adjustment is leaking. So if you play the only guaranteed way to get a nice B flat on your flute is to play B natural and then lean on your actual B flat arm, because you'll notice that that's actually closing the actual B flat key, which is the guy that you skip up here. So this is actually the cleanest B flat that you're going to get on a flute. So you play that B flat, it should sound as good as the B flat's going to sound if it's an adjustment issue and not a pad issue. Then what you can do is compare that to your, I call this 1+1, pointer plus pointer. And what I'll often do is I'll play my 1+1 with this, and I'll tap on the lever, and that'll tell me. And if I don't hear a change, that means that this fingering is fine. It's not fuzzy. The other thing, if this connection is out between the B flat and the F and the B flat key, is your high F won't really speak very well at all. So that's another check. So if your high F is fuzzy, that means there's something going on with the connection on the back of the flute. And we talked about this in maybe even the first episode. I don't remember.
Yeah, a couple of them, couple of the episodes. Yeah.
The other check for B flat is to check your B flat thumb, because often that goes out of adjustment. So what I like to do is I like to finger a high G but underblow it, and then I tap on the B natural, and then I tap on the B flat, and it should pop out equally quickly. So I just went tap, 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 and they both popped equally. So that I know that my B flat thumb is an adjustment. And again, you can also check it by, I've got my B flat thumb key, and now I'm going to tap the lever as well. no change. So I know that that's in really good shape. You can compare your F sharp. So your F sharp key is actually the one just north of your pointer finger. So if you play a G and then press on that key, that's actually the best sounding F sharp that your flute should be making. And on some flutes, adding the pinky may or may not make a difference. So you may want to try to stretch that or just leave it out and compare it that way. So when you do this, you can play your F sharp the way that you would normally play it, but then lean over and tap this. And if you hear a difference, that means that that adjustment is out. And same thing, check your middle F sharp, and you can, move your fingers around and tap and see if that's out as well. Did I miss any?
Those are great checks.
Your A to your B.
It's the low C sharp.
Oh yeah, the low C.
Oh,
okay. So I actually just did a video about this and posted it on my Instagram on my Boundless Flute Facebook page, so you can check out the full length video there. But basically, to play low C, you really should only be able to touch the roller. You don't have to smush your finger down across both of them. So you want to make sure that you can really just touch that. If it's fuzzy, it means that's out of adjustment. So yeah, in a nutshell. Anybody else got something you want to?
Just that weather changes can cause things to, if you have felt pads especially.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've had a major weather change and suddenly you're fuzzy, but it hasn't been a very long time since the weather change happened, I often tell people to kind of wait a couple days and see if it settles in, because especially with felt pads, not so much with like the Muramatsu, the new Muramatsu pads, or with the Straubingers or S2s or anything like that. But with the felt pads, sometimes they can swell up a bit and they settle after the weather settles. So it is worth sort of, if you've had a major weather change, give it a day or two and see if it's going to settle and before you start panicking, just because it's also better for your instrument if you do need an adjustment to wait until it's already kind of like settled into a new weather pattern before you get any major work done.
Yeah, cool. One other thing that I saw in my notes, was that so I was talking about plugs before, but you can also, if you're not sure, we all know that you can squeeze a little bit harder and overcome leaks that way. So that's a really bad habit to get into, because you're going to hurt your hands and maybe hurt your flute. So one way to check to see if you're squeezing or not is to just actually play the keys like way on the backs. And to do that, if you have an open hole, you'll have to plug the hole. So I just did that. So okay, so that was,
it feels very weird.
and it should pop right out. If it doesn't and you're like pushing super lightly just on the backs, that means you've got leaks that need to be addressed. While I was doing that, I thought of something else. What was it?
If you have a Miyazawa or a Burkhardt or a Sankyo, don't push the plugs through the bottom, because otherwise you'll also push out the open hole retainers.
Yes.
So if you are putting plugs in,
right. So you want to take, so this is an older Burkhardt that has normal ones, but so I could push these through, but all you do is take a pin. You're not going to hurt the plug by, I mean, it's silicone, it'll just seal itself up again. So just pull it out from the top.
Into the silicone part, not into the,
yes.
not next to the silver, into the actual silver.
And if you don't, if you have a normal one, you can just push them through and then catch them as they roll across the floor.
And for the Miyazawa flutes, it is important they usually include a set of plugs with the new flute, and it's because they're specifically a low profile one, and you do want to use this, because the ones that are a little bit too thick, if you are pressing the keys a little bit too hard, it can actually pop out the pad retainer. So use Miyazawa plugs if you can.
If you don't have plugs and you happen to have painter's tape, you can also just cut little squares of painter's tape and put it across, and they'll peel right off. Just make sure that you don't have the tape hanging over the key, because then it can actually catch on the other keys, and that's a problem. But the painter's tape, I actually did this today with a flute, because it had a funny configuration and I wanted to make sure there's no chance of me misadjusting anything. So painter's tape's another great thing that you might have kicking around the house that you can use as a temporary plug.
All right, that was our timer for our free-for-all for
Yes.
this question. Is there anything else that anybody wants to shoehorn in for the last little bit, or are we moving on?
That was good.
I'm good.
Moving on.
All right, let's do it.
Moving on.
okay.
Moving on.
So, what do we got next? We've got how to tell. Oh, this is a juicy question. Well, they all are tonight. They all are. How to tell when to upgrade, and related, should I buy a new head joint or upgrade my entire flute? So for this question, we're going to go in order of Adam, me. I'm not last. Kim, and Rachel. All right, so 30 seconds.
Same for Piccolo. So Adam, if you want to Piccolo the world.
He does.
Cool.
In my experience, what I tend to find is I always take an opportunity to sample when possible. Of course, during a pandemic, it's not easily done. To sample something that's in the next price range just above where you're at. Because if it's in good condition and you're still not getting the sound or the feedback that you need or the performance out of the instrument, then I say it's time to upgrade.
Okay, good. All right, so no, me, I think.
Is it you? Yes.
I think I'm last.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. I would say if you feel like you're playing harder music and your flute feels like it's bogging you down, like you just can't, like the flute can't physically keep up with you. The keys are moving too slowly, it's too clacky, it's too clunky. That's a really good sign that it's time to upgrade. And your teacher is usually a good one to help guide that decision. Next up is Kim.
Well, I'm gonna do the personal one on this one. One of the ways that I found that I really needed to upgrade was when I was struggling with big interval leaps, and I had been practicing a bunch of them. So it wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough. It's just the head joint and the flute were holding me back from being able to do those intervals, and I was able to do them on another head joint and another flute. So that was another way that I personally knew that I was ready to, is when you started having those wider leaps and faster leaps where precision mattered.
Yep. Cool.
From a student flute to something else.
Cool. Rachel.
And if you are on a not student flute, like say an intermediate or pre-professional, and you're wondering whether you should upgrade or not, I suppose with student flutes this applies too, but especially with the next tier of instruments, get it in top playing condition first, because it might be an adjustment issue. It might be that is affecting the performance. And either way, if you wanted to sell it and move on after you've got it in top condition, you're going to better be able to do so if it's been serviced recently. But then you can just make sure that it's not a problem with the flute leaking before you spend a bunch of money on a new flute.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, free for all.
To chime in just a little bit with piccolos, because I didn't touch on that subject at all. The age of the wood, in terms of how long it has been in service, as in how long it has been actively played or how long it's been since it's been made, that is something to also take into account. Because wood is an organic substance that changes over time, and as much as makers want to provide an instrument that has longevity, we cannot make the material anything other than what it is. So I kind of treat piccolos as if they're cars. So once you hit 10 to 15 years, it's time to replace them, or at least rotate them from a primary instrument to a secondary instrument for those that are pursuing professional aspirations. And then also just that general time frame, if you're a professional player and you have a professional sort of caliber instrument, if it's been to 10 or 15 years and you have had a good quality overhaul, it's also worthwhile just exploring what's on the market, because your body has changed in 10 and 15 years. So it's not necessarily that it's an upgrade, but maybe a sideways step that may be advantageous, because getting new equipment is also a matter of what is appropriate for your physiology at this stage in your life. And I think that's something that I've had to coach several players through as they've aged. I've had to talk them into plugs. I've had to talk them into lighter instruments, so on and so forth, just because people are mortal and so are their instruments. And it's important to keep that in mind, that we change and our preferences change.
I like that.
And talking about head joint upgrades too, I've seen a lot of head joint upgrades chosen on leaky flute bodies, and that really changes the head joint that appeals to you the most. And it sometimes can result in a choice that maybe doesn't have the depth and color that you can possibly achieve with a flute that's functioning really well. In short, it can affect your decision making. So even if you're just head joint shopping, I highly recommend having the flute checked out or get a COA beforehand, so that you really know what the best combination is for you.
I not trying to like hijack it again, but Rachel, I literally just had an example of that leave today, and it was an instrument where they bought a new head joint, but the piccolo still had pads in it that were almost 20 years old, and it had been in a lot of professional service. And when I received it, I liked the new head joint that they had bought better. But then after the work was done, I liked the original one better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important to make sure you're taken care of, because it makes a difference on how your equipment plays, and whether or not that upgrade is or is not ideal for you.
Yeah, I just to kind of piggyback on that a little bit. So speaking about, whether to upgrade your flute or not, or the head joint, because the head joint can cover up issues with the flute, it's interesting to note that the trend that's happening now in head joints being very responsive, to the point of like being brassy, and just that immediate response that it's loud, and it's easy to articulate, and it just pops right out. Oftentimes those are paired with flute bodies that aren't really made the best, and they do it on purpose because that head joint is going to cover up the insufficiencies of that flute body. So it can be used in both directions. So it may be a thing of like, you love your flute because it's like that balancing act between like, you've got that super responsive head joint and the body that's kind of fallen behind. And so that may actually be a sign for like, when you upgrade, don't necessarily go for a head joint that is doing what your former head joint did, because on a flute that's built more precisely, you may not need that much of like a turbocharged head joint on it. You may need something that's capable of more color, like what Rachel was saying.
Well, and that sort of brings us to the like how to discern steps, because flutes are actually pretty complicated. We've got our student flutes that we mostly all start on, and then there's this whole sort of very muddy area that are often referred to as like step up flutes or intermediate flutes. And then there's like pre-professional and professional, and that can be really, really confusing. The most important thing that I try to remind people of is our student flutes are what we learn on and what we accidentally bump against things. And they're great for what they are. And they let us know that we want to play long-term. And that's their role. And then the role of step-up flutes really is to allow a player who's advanced past just a very entry-level flute to have a better flute to play while they are saving up for something that will be a long-term instrument. And that's why the companies pair the nicer head joints with a body that isn't necessarily meant to be as durable. They're not designed to last for 20 or 30 years. That's not what they're intended. And that's okay, because the point is to actually get you an instrument that will suffice for that couple of years while you're shopping and finding out what kind of flute you really want to buy long-term, because they're expensive, and then give you a good backup that you're already really, really comfortable with. So it's important to kind of understand that like step up instruments in that like, $800, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 range are not meant they're not built to be forever instruments.
Right.
And the manufacturers are really actually very clear about that. They don't intend them to last 20 or 30 years.
Right. Well, and here's where it gets difficult, because you do
It's
have some
tricky.
flutes that are, in the early 4,000-ish range price wise, but they're
Right.
professionally, they're the professional
Exactly.
mechanism, professional,
Yeah.
absolutely everything, but they're plated. And that's
Yeah.
where the low price comes from. It's not because
Yes.
they're lesser quality instruments. So like, I'm going to name names here: Muramatsu, Miyazawa. Their
Yes.
bottom tier offerings are not step-up flutes. Those are not intermediate flutes. Those are not pre-professional flutes. Those are handmade professional level flutes at like bargain, like mind-blowing prices for the amount of flute that you get. So a lot of people go, oh my God, $4,000, that's so much money. But you're getting the same mechanism that they put on their $13,000 flute. Like,
yes.
like that's,
I actually play I actually play a Miyazawa 202, which is a professional handmade flute with a plated body, and it's because I was in a car accident a number of years ago and I needed something that was lighter weight. And it is a lighter weight flute for me, and it will do all of the tricks that a $10,000 flute will do, or a $20,000 flute will do. And because I'm not reactive to silver, the fact that it's silver plating doesn't bother me at all, because it's good quality silver plating. So it does become tricky, and it's one of those things where it's good to navigate whether the bodies are like, if it's a fully handmade body, that's a different category. And it is definitely something to do a bunch of research and talk to your flute tech about, because yeah, it is very kind of muddy and complicated to figure out where the lines are. And we talk to each other a lot about that, about the like what falls into what, and how do we define things, because if we're having problems figuring out some days where things fall, players have the right to be completely confused.
I can figure that. Well, just to like pick up what Kim was saying just about like the Miyazawas being what they are. I also have a 202, but mine is much younger. But get this, I have a gold head joint on my flute. So I know that's a really strange combination, but it is a way that, like, for me, I realized, okay, I needed a much better instrument than I could afford to buy in terms of a body. But I had an opportunity to acquire a gold head joint at a price point that I could meet. So I know that even though I would prefer an all gold flute, I was able to upgrade the head joint to get a lot of those features.
That's what I did as well.
And so I have a plated body, but it is handmade top to bottom. And I mean, mechanically it holds up with the best of anything that is on my desk. And when I bought it, it was like $4,000 with all the bells and whistles. That was like 15 years ago. But it's confusing.
So I guess the bottom line that I would love people to kind of take away from this little section of the conversation is that a silver plated flute is not inferior to a solid silver flute. That's not what it's about. It's not about the tube material. There's so much more that goes into making a flute sound good than the material that it's made out of. So I oftentimes see, students will come to me and say, my teacher said I need a solid silver with a low B and open holes. And I'm like, are you willing to rethink that?
Well, and
you get so much more flute for your money if you're willing to give up the solid silver body. And
a perfect example of that, I can't remember all the specs, so I'm going off of memory, but Yamaha actually has a flip that happens where they have silver plated everything, silver plated body, solid head, solid body, solid head, and then it flips back to being a silver plated body. But at that point, it's no longer what we would think of as a commercial, like mass market made one. Now you're into like a handmade body. So even though it's reverted back to being a silver plated body, it's actually a better quality instrument because the key fitting is better and the pads are different, and all sorts of other things. So it's a perfect example of it, because people always ask me about this. Why is it this with Yamaha, and then it goes back, and that's so silly. And it's because
400 to 500. Yeah. So the 400 is still a
Yeah.
student flute. It's still a student model flute. It just has holes
Yeah.
and silver. Like, but you're not getting a better mechanism than your 200.
Yeah.
And
the
I
500 is
so
a professionally,
yeah. And I love Yamaha. They're like some of my favorite flutes. So I'm not knocking them. It's just that's how it's structured.
Well, and it's a perfect example of why that solid silver versus silver plate argument doesn't really hold a lot of water, and it's the mechanism that's the most important. The material the instrument is made out of is important, but the way that the mechanism is designed is often how we as flute technicians determine where the lines are on things.
Yes.
Because student mechanisms just are never going to be able to hold a professional pad no matter what we do to them, because they're intentionally designed with enough like wiggle and slop that when you accidentally do things to them because you're a student, they will still play. So that is a very intentional choice on the part of a lot of the makers to make it so those flutes will actually play when you use them like an average, I've been playing 1 or 2 or 3 years, student will play them.
Yeah, you should be able to, like, you know, you can drop kick a student flute and it will probably still be okay. But don't. And as a former elementary and middle school band director, I have seen some things.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
like,
so
okay, so like just really quick, and like I'd be standing on the podium and like 4th grade, 5th grade band, like literally once every 5 minutes, like crash, 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 and it's like the kids are just like sitting there, and then suddenly the instrument is on the floor, and they're like, I have no idea how it happened. And you're just like, okay, bring it up. Oh, it's fine.
That's what
okay.
our good old student flute friends are for.
That's
they're
what they're
there
for.
for us in those situations.
They are.
Well, and that's another one of the things that's also convenient with plated bodies is they tend to be a little bit more durable.
They are.
Not necessarily the plating surface on heavy
metal
flutes, the plating
harder.
is significant as well. But yeah, the other thing that's nice is that they do provide a little bit more durability if
gravity strikes. When gravity strikes.
Yeah, when the universe works against you, they survive. Okay.
All right. So let's quickly touch on you guys were showing off your gold head joints fitted to your flutes. So let's briefly touch on that, because someone actually specifically asked us if we would talk about like when it's appropriate to fit a gold head joint to a not gold flute, and the reason why this is a question for people who aren't really aware is that the wall thicknesses are different. So oftentimes a gold head joint will be significantly loose when you try to put it on a silver flute. So in order to make that tenon not leak, if you have that problem, there's a wide variety of ways you can achieve that. So does I don't know, somebody want to lead off with one of those ways?
I'll jump in with the most temporary one while everybody looks for other things.
Okay. Cool.
While everyone's looking for stuff. Honestly, one of the safest ways, especially if you're trying a head joint to see if you like it and you haven't like committed to buying it yet, because I knew Adam was going for those, is just Teflon tape. And it's a plumber's tape, Teflon tape, PTFE, if you want to not trademark anything. It's like $1 for a whole roll. And I know professional players who literally use this their entire lives on their head joints because that's all that they want to use. They don't want to use anything else. So it is a legitimate fix, but I like it because it can do no harm under normal circumstances that don't involve chaos, but they seal really well. It's inexpensive, and it allows you to try a head joint to see whether you're going to like it long term. It's also good if you flip between 2 different flute bodies, and you want something that can be custom fit across different flutes. I have a number of clients that do that, and they stick with this after 10-15 years, and it's specifically because they want to be able to move between the flutes and not have anything permanent that they have to deal with.
Cool. Adam, you wanna?
Yeah, I
do
have
the other kinds of tape.
Yeah.
I have stuff.
So
I love that stuff. I have it too.
Aside from using like Scotch, like tape like that, you can also get like these metal tapes. You can get them from a lot of dealers. I mean, like technicians, we know where to buy it by the roll, but you can get it in silver finish and like a gold finish.
Yeah.
Those work really well, and you can just do little strips.
Just to clarify, though, it's not metal; it's plastic, but it looks like
right. It's actually it's a nylon tape, is what it is, or mylar.
It's mylar.
Blends.
Do you want to make me big for half a second? Because I happen to have one that has it fit, I believe, from. Oh, hang on. Let's see if we can catch it. You can sort of catch it in the light.
Yep.
And this was put on maybe by the factory, or by when it was this flute and head joint were paired together. I'm covering it the logo intentionally, because it's a client's. But you can actually see right here, and it's only fitted to maybe like an inch by like a half an inch. So this one, it only needed that amount of gap fill, and this is how it'll be for forever. It's a platinum and silver mix head joint and body. Cool. So, yeah.
And this is in light of whether or not you are concerned about like stretching, having tendon stretch to fit, and because we're like if not how to tell when to do it.
Yeah.
Just because we've talked about like methods of doing it rather than why, which I think is an important thing. If it is super, super loose, I would do one of these other ways rather than stretch it. Or if you ever expect to sell it, if it's not your live or die forever head joint, then I would do something more temporary.
Yeah. And I would say the choice between whether to expand a head joint tenon or to use one of the other two methods, which I'll let somebody else talk about, it really depends on how much smaller the tenon is than the barrel, because there is a certain point at which it's not safe to stretch. And I've seen head joints with damage because someone tried to stretch it to fit a much larger tenon, and you get this like step in the top side of the tenon, and it's ugly, and it always makes me really sad when I see that, because there's like better ways of fitting that, and especially like low carat golds, those are scary. You don't want to be stretching those because they can shatter. So let's talk about some safer methods. Rachel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, and also just adding on the gold thing, the gold tubing is also much thinner than the silver tubing. So even if someone did a super nice job stretching it out and it's really still quite cylindrical, it's so thin. It's I don't know, it's really not safe for it to be that thin, not to mention the other physical issues with stretching gold. So so there are two other alternatives for a permanent fit if you don't want to do a temporary fitting method. One being, there are a couple shops out there that can make you a silver sleeve, and they actually solder on a very thin sheet of silver and turn it down on the lathe to size. And that's a very slick solution. It is not easy to do, and not every repair shop is outfitted to do that. But I have seen it executed very well by Keith Anderson at Burkhart. He's a magician with that, but I'm not sure if that's something that's being offered at this time. But I have seen it done well. It's just obscure, I would say. Did someone else want to introduce the other permanent method?
I could talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
So actually, and I mean, the sleeve is removable, so it's not really permanent.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not as permanent as
technically speaking.
Technically speaking, it could be taken off.
Kind of a mess.
Yeah, exactly. And so the other thing that's people sometimes do is they plate the tenon up to size. And again, that's kind of a rarer thing to do. The last time I had a client looking into it, I talked to the one place that I knew had done it in the past, and they were like, we don't have the chemical to do that right now. So that's a little bit, it is possible. It's done. I just right now would have to search around to find somebody who could do it, but that would be the other way. And again, that is removable. You could sand it off again if you ever needed to. But so that, I would say that the sleeve and the plating would be like, if you're really like must have your head joint like fit for whatever reason and you don't want to use the tape, the tape is really, I know it seems like not a cool thing to do, like it seems kind of hacky, but it really is legit.
It works.
It works.
For what it's worth, a
Yeah.
number of the manufacturers, I happen to have a client who's getting some head joints on trial right now. And because it's going to be a mix and match, so it's going to be one brand going on a different brand, they're sending the tape that they use at the factory to do fitting, and they recommend that as they recommend that as a legitimate permanent fix. I mean, permanent meaning long term, not permanent meaning you can't take it off. But they recommend that as the answer. Like it's not a temporary fix and you need to do something else. It's kind of like, this is legit, and leave it there for the end of your days.
Cool.
It's safe. One of the things I would like to really quickly jump in about is one of the problems with expanding and doing that step is that head joint makers spend an awful lot of time doing the math on getting that taper exactly right for response, not only for the head joint, but the head joint in the body. So the problem with expanding the living daylights out of a head joint is that you basically wreck all the dimensions that head joint was built for.
Right.
So I really, really encourage everybody against it. The other thing, other than those plastic strips, is the copper strips that JL Smith sells. I like the plastic ones that Adam showed a lot better because I think that they're much safer.
Yeah, I've seen the copper ones kind of shred, and they get gunky, and like I perhaps there is someone out there who can use them well, but it is not me.
The only time that I've had them on my personal head joint, and the only time that I had them work well was when the head joint required an entire an entire wrap. So that what ended up happening is that I wrapped the entire head joint so it butted against each other.
Yes.
And then sanded it down and fitted it down. That way, sort of like a fake sleeve put on. And that is the only time I have ever had it work well and effectively, and I was not concerned about it later on causing any damage or grief or anything. The plastic is great because the plastic isn't going to scratch anything, and if it gets loose, guess what? You take it off and you put some more plastic on. So it makes it a lot more safe for individuals.
Let's hit up our last question because we have about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
Okay, so our last question, which is probably, I mean, we're gonna have to be concise, I think, because it's another one that we could spend a lot of time on. So this is should I fix Aunt Jenny's old closet flute, or should I rent a new one? So, you know, that Armstrong open hole solid silver, you know, from the 1980s or 90s or 70s. That just, it looks like
please,
such a
not from the
tempting
70s.
flute. It looks like such a tempting flute. What should we do with that flute? Okay, so we're gonna go in order. It's gonna be me, oh boy, and then Rachel, and then Adam, and then Kim. Okay. I see a lot of these. I think that they are wonderful. If it's the flute that you grew up with and you're nostalgic for it, and it's the only flute that you've ever played, and like it's your you just have so much attachment to that flute, then yes, for you, like fix it up, overhaul that baby, play it like it's your baby. But if you're thinking about giving it to, you know, your high school age niece or nephew to play, there might be more conversations that need to happen. So that's my 30 seconds. So who's next?
Oh, it's
Rachel.
Me. Okay. Yes, and you know, many of those flutes that were built, you know, 30 years ago are still very repairable, and they're well made enough that yes, you can take it to a repair shop and they can repad it for you, and it'll be a serviceable instrument. So that's an option. But what you need to look into is there's been a lot of advancements in flute making in the past 30 years, and it would be worth, before making that decision, to just try what else is out there.
Yeah.
I assume I'm close to 30 seconds.
That was it. Yeah. Good job. Adam.
I am sort of in an unfavorable position here. Unless it is extremely sentimental, I advocate replacement, just because there are dealers here in the States that sell like the entry-level Jupiter stuff for like $500. And there are other places that will do rent to own sort of things for you. And because of the improvements in manufacturing, the overall experience is going to be much more gratifying for that person than taking an instrument and having it repadded for $300 when you can have something made with the newest technology for $5. So unless it's super sentimental, I say replace it.
Okay. Kim.
There's so much to unwrap here. I'm going to go over my head. I think that if it's a new student starting, that renting is almost always the best choice. And the reasons for that are, you don't know whether the student's going to continue. So renting is a lesser cost, lesser investment. They're also going to learn how to put it together, and it's going to fall on the floor and drop into things. And it is significantly better for them to learn how to do that on an instrument that you don't own. Having worked, I used to work in a place that did a huge rental fleet. And the reality is that 12-year-olds don't drive vehicles for really important reasons, because they're still learning where their edges are. And renting a flute for $100 for a year and having all of the repairs covered is a better way to spend your money than a gamble on whether they're going to use an instrument that hasn't been played for 30 years for even a year. So that's my 30 seconds, and then I'll talk more after.
I started the free for all. You're good.
Okay. Like, jump back onto like your point with that. If you're concerned about like the equity of fixing a new instrument versus a used one and things like that, if you are attempting to fix up just an old flute that you have in your closet and you spend $300 on a repad at a general service band shop, and then they decide that they don't want to play anymore, and you go to sell it just to kind of get your money back. Instruments of that style and of an age where it's now it was your instrument before, but now it's your child's instrument, you're going to be lucky to get maybe $100 out of them. So you are already at least $200 in the negative that way. Whereas if you were to buy an entry-level Jupiter brand new and they only played it for one school year, yes, you spent $500 on it at, A, B, and C places, and there are places that do that. You could still turn it around for probably $4. And you would have a much easier time. And that's not even getting into the fact on whether or not there are bugs in the case, or, there are so many
mold.
issues. Mold. There are so many issues. So even though it's tempting, that's kind of why for me, I think, you have so many more options available.
Right.
And the experience will be more pleasant.
Sorry, I outlined myself too soon. I was sorry. So along that same thread, this comes back to those old solid silver open hole instruments. It's a heartbreaking conversation to have with somebody who's like, like my parents bought me my first open hole Gemeinhardt when I was in high school. No, I was in 7th grade. I was in 7th grade and I had an open hole solid silver flute, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, right? And they spent $1,000 on it. Oh my God, like $1,000, right? And that was like, I'm gonna age myself now. So that was like 1994. So I just want people to sit here and think about, okay, my parents spent $1,000 on a solid silver open hole flute in 1994. They are still selling solid silver open hole step up flutes for $1,000 today. Like, just the inflation, like the quality, like, so this is kind of going back to that step up flute conversation. Like, it's not usually a good idea to spend $1,000 on a step up flute. Like, wait till you have a little more money. So back to my original point, which is, okay, say I wanted to sell my solid silver Gemeinhardt open hole flute right nowadays, because, and I know that it was precious to me at that time. My parents like saved to get that for me. It was it was such an important step in my life. And I think that it's still worth $1,000. Or maybe it's like worth $800, right? Because, you know, I kept it in really, really good condition, but I understand that it's used. Okay. Unfortunately, there are so many of those flutes out there on eBay floating around used. They've never been repatted. They're, you know, they still play okay because, you know, you took good care of it. But the market is totally saturated. And like what Rachel was saying, the market has come so far. Flute making has come so far since that time that that flute cannot compete with what's coming out today. So nobody wants to buy it. And it's heartbreaking to have to tell that to people, but it's, you might get like what Adam's saying, like maybe $200 for it. And it's just, it's so difficult to tell people that who are hoping, you know, that they might get $700 for this old flute. And you might, you know, you might find somebody who's willing to pay that, but you know, for me to overhaul a flute, I would have to charge like $700 for my time to get it done well and make it sound, you know, good. And it's just the cost effectiveness just, again, unless it's nostalgic, it often isn't there. And nostalgia, like you cannot put a price on that. Like I overhauled a Bundy from the 1950s because one of my clients, oh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I loved every minute of it. So I overhauled this Bundy from the 1950s. You know, it had that like beefy case, and it was just
Yeah.
it was built like a tank. But it was her first flute that her parents bought for. She still had the certificate of like, you know, this is you're like, oh, and it's awesome. And she's giving
Don't make me cry.
I know, right? And she's giving it to her granddaughter to play in 4th grade band. Like, and you know, I charged $450 for an overhaul. And like, yeah, she could have totally gone out and gotten a brand new Jupiter, but like, how sweet is that?
That's
like
mega cool though.
right? Like that to me is totally worth it. And the flute played great. It's a tank. It's going to keep going forever. You know, is it going to play like as quickly and responsively as like a brand new Yamaha student flute? Like just because they've come further in embouchure cutting? Probably not, but is it going to get her through to like 7th or 8th grade to her, like, you know, her next flute or high school? Yeah, it's going to do the job. And now it's a sweet story. So to me, yeah, totally worth it.
Yeah. And
No, go.
I was just going to say that, you know, that we're talking about the equity with the monetary value of something with instruments, since it's not an unemotional thing. It's not just about how much it's worth to you in dollars, it's how much it's worth to you in your heart. And so like that's totally something to factor in, and it's legit, and no one should make you feel bad for that. I know that there are some folks out there that have been made to feel bad for wanting to fix something, and that's not what we're trying to say, because like Sarah said, we totally get it, you know. It's just more that we just want to make sure that you understand the trade-off and on the financial side. But like, if I couldn't overhaul my first Jupiter flute, I would be that person that would take it to someone like me and be like, do the best overhaul you can. Yeah. I don't care. Just do it. I love it.
I have the perfect segue for this one. The answer to fix the old one and or rent something is we want to give that player the best chance of falling in love with playing flute. And that's what it comes down to. So it's not that the gold flute isn't sentimental and stuff like that, but if you're starting a brand new student, you want to give them the best opportunity you have to get them an instrument that is going to give them that chance. And often that means renting something, because it can give you something that's better than what you would be able to provide for a reasonable amount of money, because everybody's money stretched thin.
Yeah.
Like you know, so there's that. But then hang on. This is the segue, because this is worth it. Okay. But then this is my very first flute that I bought back in 1992. And I will continue. I don't play this as my primary, it's my backup, but I will continue like overhauling and repatting and like, you know, souping up this flute so it's something way better than it was ever. This is now like built so it's way more than Gemeinhardt ever thought that a flute would ever be coming out of that protection line, because it's not a professional thing. So it's that balance of if you love it, that's a different story. And it's important for you to tell us that if it's all sentimental, you're like, I just need it to be sentimental. I know it doesn't make any financial sense. Can you do it anyway?
Yep.
Tell us that, because we need to know. Because that shapes how we interact with the instrument. And if it's just like, hey, you know what, I bought it at a garage sale, it's like 50 years old, like, can it work? We kind of need to know that too, because we want to give you an honest thing, but we also don't want to hurt your feelings.
Right. Yes. And can I like a similar, on a kind of similar but pivoting thought. So if and I find this a lot with my woodwind doubler clients, in that they often have vintage flutes that don't come in for repair very often, and they don't know much about flutes other than they make this thing work. It like gets the job done. It's fine. It's silver and has open holes. It should be great, right? And so more than once I have put in their hand, like they've brought it to me and said, this needs work. And I kind of look at the flute and I go, you know, why don't you take this Yamaha 222 home for a week? Like, go down to, I have a favorite music store in Connecticut, Stewart's Music. They're awesome. They will rent you a Yamaha 222 for like $0. They're awesome people. If you're in Connecticut, go support them because they deserve it. And I say, okay, just humor me. Go down there, pick up a 222, play it, and then tell me if you still want me to put $700 worth of work into this instrument. And every single time they're like, I had no idea. I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, it has closed holes, it is plated, but you know what? It plays circles around the thing that even if I overhauled this, that the Yamaha would still play circles around it. So
and it would be easier to maintain too. And it's so much less expensive to maintain a closed hole flute. That like it's such a good deal.
So anyway, that's pretty much our time. Does anybody want to wrap?
Oh, we did have a question on that very subject though from Kiara
about a silver.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I actually have one, and I thought, so what Kiara's talking about is she's got a solid silver Armstrong piccolo that has been, you know, loved, and this is not hers, I just happen to have one. And I was like, oh, I didn't know where it was, so I dug it out. And her question was like, what about an instrument like this? Like, is this worth putting money into? So from a strictly financial standpoint, and if it's not sentimental, this instrument is going to be impossible to sell. Ask me how I know. I've been trying to sell this for 3 years. And now it's to the point where like the pads are like, they were kind of, you know, I kind of bought it as a fixer upper and was like gonna be like, let's see if I could like make this sound really good and then flip it. I made it sound really good and I could not flip it. And I put the minimum amount of work that I was willing to spend on it, and you know, had my excellent piccolo playing friend Alex make some videos. She sounds fantastic. The piccolo sounds amazing, right? But nobody wants metal piccolos, like especially not solid silver ones, because they want, if you get a metal piccolo, you want to march with it, and you don't want to be marching with a solid silver instrument. Somebody else can jump in if you think I'm wrong, but
no, but yeah, so if as long as you don't intend to ever sell the piccolo, if it's something that is very meaningful to you and you wanted to keep it and keep playing it, by all means repad it, because then you'll actually be able to enjoy playing it, because I'm sure if it needs a repad, it probably is not as fun to play right now.
Right.
So, but if you think that if you're not really super attached to it, or if you wanted to resell it, it might not be worthwhile in that sense.
Yeah. The biggest thing to check with metal piccolos is they have a tendency to turn into bananas. There's no way around it. I think I have seen a whopping 5 piccolos that are metal in my lifetime that have not been slightly curved. and
It's a
it's just
feature,
because
Kim.
it's ergonomics.
It's
It's just
ergonomics.
because they're so small that they tend to go like this, and once they've done it once, they tend to really like to go back. So checking the body and checking the mechanism is really, really important, because if it's already sort of doing the banana thing, that's something to consider. That being said, restoring and playing an old metal piccolo has much more potential than a old
Yes.
student wood piccolo, because as Adam was saying earlier, organics, really old wood stuff moving around, the bore's not going to be the same. At least with a metal instrument, you do have the advantage of the bore's going to be the same, even if it's kind of banana-y.
It'll be a stable banana.
Yeah.
It's a stable banana.
Stable banana. So like if you know that you've heard the piccolo played, like, because I think her question, she said it had been played professionally by people that she knew. So if it's a case of like, you know what that piccolo sounds like, you really like that piccolo, you will enjoy playing that piccolo, like, yeah, put the money into it and enjoy the heck out of it. Like I said, when I had this piccolo working well, it was a nice sounding instrument. It's just people are very hesitant to buy metal piccolos because there's the concept that they're shrill and that they're loud and that they're not as controllable as wood, and it's very hard to convince people otherwise, even if you do have a unicorn of a silver piccolo that is mellow and beautiful and all of the things that you want a piccolo to be. Adam, do you want to jump in?
I mean, that's basically everything that I have to say, sort of in a nutshell. I mean, I do on rare occasions see the old handmade silver Haynes piccolos.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one of those in front of you and it's at a good price, and that's probably worth putting some money into. A lot of those tend to be like the D flat piccolos. So if you're wanting that sort of novelty thing, yeah. But I mean, most of the time though, if it's an old entry or step up level piccolo that's been around the block several times, I mean, the manufacturing technology and the research regarding piccolo acoustics and scale have just gotten so dramatically better, even in the past 10 years, that you would likely have a more pleasant experience playing something newer. And that's all that I really have to add to it. Because there are metal ones, but they are few and far between.
This question often comes up with military bands or cadet bands that need an outdoor piccolo and the metal piccolo. So they have an old professional metal piccolo. And that would be one of those ones that I would go, if you know it has potential and you know what you're using it for, it's probably worth, because they're not worried about resale. They don't care. Like those situations are a little bit different. But just because they know it's going to be outside and it's going to, it paid off years and years ago. So they're not worried about, like, if something happens to it, they're not so concerned. They just need something that plays that isn't, a $10,000 Keith for marching in the rain outside in just above freezing.
Yep, true. All right, guys. I think we covered everything.
I think so. And my dogs are downstairs, so I guess it must be the end of the show.
It's they're like, hey, we're finished.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you who joined us on Zoom, despite Facebook totally misbehaving. We really again.
We love technology.
Yeah, but we just. I think I speak for all of us when I say that every time we see how many people actually wait for us when a glitch like this happens and then come and show up on Zoom and like stick around and watch the show. It's kind of unbelievable. Like it's just, and we're so grateful that
we appreciate you.
We really, really do. So we're just trying to spread the gospel of good flute care. Can I get an amen? So thank you to everybody. Oh, thank you, Stephanie. She's applauding. So we will next week we'll be on Patreon with our players. So I hope our player patrons will join us there. And then the week after that, we'll be doing a normal show like this again. Well, hopefully normal on Facebook and not like just normal on, anyway. All right. So anyway, thank you to everyone for coming, and
Thank you.
yeah, we'll see you around.
Send us your questions.
Yes, please send us your
Yes,
questions.
please more
Send us your questions.
We love questions.
We love questions.
We do. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.